everybody. This is Brady Henderson from the First Baptist Church in Gaston, South Carolina, and you are listening to the 86th episode of the Menorah Podcast. The podcast seeks to share the light, speak the light, and send the light of Jesus Christ all across the airwaves of the internet. And I'm here today with my friend and co-host and sound engineer of the Swansea Tiger Sports Network, Alan Ott. And Alan, how you doing, man?
Doing good. We're halfway through October.
Yep.
And, starting to cool off a little bit.
At the time of our recording, you just recently got back from Chattanooga. And so that is home. I don't know if you knew this, but that is home of the AA affiliate of the Cincinnati Reds, Chattanooga Lookouts.
I did not know that. I didn't see that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where the stadium is. I've never been to Chattanooga, but one reason I know about that is every year, I'm one of those sports nerds. I get the emails on MILB, Minor League Baseball, Hat of the Year. You have to vote, right? And that one's always up there because they call them the Lookouts, and so they have a pair of eyes on the hat. I don't know. I guess it's just kind of interesting. So anyway, Chattanooga Lookouts. But hey, Alan, last few weeks we have had a lot of guests in our interview series, Perspective of the Pastors. We had one non-pastor, obviously Dan Scott, 2 weeks ago, but he is involved in ministry. And so that was a lot of fun. Of course, Lee Butler last week, we got to introduce him, and that came at a great time because we had a great homecoming this past Sunday, and of course Lee came and preached for homecoming. And so hopefully you all were able to listen to the interview with Lee before he preached Sunday. We didn't plan it that way. That's just kind of how God worked it out. And of course, with the difference of homecoming this year, I really had to plan it pretty quickly. I kind of forgot about it because it wasn't in the usual. Now that I've been here 5 years, I've kind of gotten into my groove, so to speak, as far as knowing when things are coming up. And since we moved it from regular August, it just kind of hit me back in September. Oh, yeah, I got to get somebody to speak for homecoming. I forgot about that. So some of our other former pastors couldn't come. So anyway, but Lee was able to do that. So we're actually going to start a new series today, Alan. For the next 5 episodes, this is going to be the first one. So 86 to 90, we want to talk about pillars of the church. And we're not talking about individuals. Obviously, we have a lot of great individuals who have been pillars in our church for a long time, which is a great thing. But I want to talk about 5 specific areas that I think are pillars of the church that stand up, make our church stand, make us effective in ministry. And so those 5 that we're going to talk about are evangelism, preaching, discipleship, missions, and worship. And so at the time we're recording this, we are pretty not too far removed from our Mission Sunday. And if you are listening today and you don't know what I'm talking about, please go on our YouTube channel, look at the service from September the 28th. I believe the video is entitled The Shockwaves of Missions. Please watch that. Watch that video. That is our mission service, and we talked about all kind of different missions. And so that's one of our pillars that I kind of want to kick off and talk about a little bit today, Alan. With each of these pillars, we do want to talk about how our church does these things, what we're doing now in each of these 5 areas, and how we can grow in each individual area. And so we'll do that in evangelism, preaching, discipleship, missions, and worship. But today we're going to start by talking a little bit about missions. And so, obviously, Mission Sunday was awesome. Just reflect a little bit on that. You had a part in the service, but overall, what did you think? Because it was the very first Mission Sunday that we've had. We had a sending service last year that kind of served as a Mission Sunday, but this was the first actual Mission Sunday that was planned and was all about missions. And so, for those that either haven't watched it yet or just to refresh our memory, because it is October the 16th, what were your thoughts on Mission Sunday?
Well, specifically for our podcast, I think that this comes at a great time because we did have Mission Sunday. We talked with Dan Scott, which is he has a mission, and he knows what his mission is, and he has that assignment. And so we've recently also started our missions work through our brotherhood, and so this is really kind of a really good time to be doing this particular episode on the podcast. So Mission Sunday I was really impressed with it. I thought it was probably one of our better Sundays. Just that refreshing view of some of the things our church might be involved in that some of the folks may not know about. For example, I really didn't know that we were still involved with the folks in Kentucky. My heart was warmed by that. Sometimes I think once things gets out of sight, they're out of mind.
Yeah, it's
And
very easy to do that.
yes, and I mean, it's human nature. And I'm glad that we are still in touch with those guys. I think about Brother Chris and his shoe drive. He's been up there a couple of times now, and when we had our chili cook-off last year, we loaded up some supplies and stuff and took up there during that.
Yeah, we
So
filled up a horse trailer. Yeah, that was a big deal when we did that. So, yeah, so missions is a really big part of what we do here. And I do think also one thing that definitely don't want folks to forget is that missions is something that we do year round, right? And I think one thing that opened a lot of people's eyes yesterday was the amount of financial. We put our money where our mouth is, I think, when it comes to financial giving and missions. And so I shared this statistic yesterday in our 2025 budget. 11.2% of that budget goes towards some kind of missions. And I don't know if people have ever thought about it like this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I mentioned in that mission service, I said, what's so interesting is that we ask you as a church member to tithe. That's normal. So we as a church need to be doing that too. And so our tithe is to missions. And I don't know if people had ever thought about that before. That's how I was brought up as far as missions givings go. I was always taught that the church needed to give 10% to missions because they're asking people to tithe. I don't know if that was a new concept to you or to our listeners. You want to speak to that?
it was a new concept, but yeah, and I appreciate that opportunity. It was a new concept for me, and I've been here for 60 years, old enough to know really what's going on. That's really the first time I'd ever heard that. And I think
That's really, sorry to interrupt, that's really interesting to me because it just shows how we're all different and how I love our church. But I grew up in a Southern Baptist church and it was like 10%, 10%, got to have 10% to missions. And if our budget didn't have to, we could cut anything on the budget where I grew up, but you couldn't cut missions.
right.
I'm not saying that that's not necessarily the same mantra here. We're trying to build that, but I guess I'm surprised 62, 63. I just find that interesting that somebody who's been in the church their entire life that was the first time you've heard that concept.
Several years back, I've also been involved in leadership as a deacon, participating in budget discussions, and later in a financial role, participating in budget discussions. And for many years, our missions givings, specifically to the Lexington Baptist Association and the South Carolina Baptist Convention, were percentages of
Yes,
our undesignated offering,
that's right.
or what we would consider our budget amount. And so those percentages, um, for the most part, those percentages added to 10%, which did not include the special offerings such as Lighting Moon.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so theoretically we were there, we just weren't.
Cognizant.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
wasn't a driving force, I guess, would be
Yeah.
a good way to say that. And once you said that, it makes perfectly good sense.
Well, and I want people to know too that 11.2%, that's not all CP, that's not all LBA, that's local, that's organizations we support and things like that. And so we definitely, as I said yesterday, I want us to increase that every year. Even if it's only 11.6. We have a pretty large budget. So that's still a lot to increase.
Well, this time of year, we do something. Miss Beverly will know what I'm talking about. We do something called an ACP, and it's
Yeah,
annual church profile.
yeah.
And basically, they ask us a lot of things. They're much simpler now than in some times past. But one of the things that I used to do in my roles was the financial portion of it. So that's where you see it's really easy. And all the years I did this, it never dawned on me to do the math to get the percentage. But you have to do your total giving. You have to do all of your missional giving, which in terms of The ACP also includes the support we do for the GPS. It is support that we would have in place for things like the missions trip.
Mm-hmm.
Any amount of money that we spend, our individuals or organizations within the church spend to help other people in Jesus' name.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we did talk about that Mission Sunday, 11.2%, 24,000 of that is cooperative program giving. We want to go up in that this year when our financial teams meet, and then stewardship teams, and then of course our LBA giving is at 8,000. We want to go up on that. Of course, that's up from 25% last year, and the cooperative program giving's up 100% since 2023. So that's really neat. And that's the other thing. All of our mission offerings are not included in that. Lottie Moon last year, $12,302.31. $7,800 was given to Annie Armstrong last year. And then this year, we defeated our goal, shredded our goal, kicked the goal in the door kind of thing. Goal was 4,000 for Jenny Chapman. And the reason we kept that goal the same as last year, Alan, is when I met with some of our leadership, I said, hey, we probably don't need to go higher than 4,000 because we also have a building fund that we're giving to, and I didn't want folks to feel strapped and pressured and tight and all that, and so we decided not to go over that, and then the church just showed up and showed out, and $5,042 to local state missions through the Jenny Chapman offering. And so it's super encouraging. And of course, the 7 partnerships that we talked about on Mission Sunday, and we've got those videos broken up on the YouTube channel in part 1 and part 2. Not so you don't have to go through the service to find them. You can watch the entire service, but we also picked out some clips of the actual mission testimonies. And so, of course, you spoke about the Brotherhood and how they are reinvigorated and relaunched and revitalized and all the R words, and they are doing great at doing some local missions, some yard projects, and have some maintenance things and some other things planned. And so that was one. And, of course, our women's ministry, every time they get together, they do some sort of missions project. I think that's really awesome. How that works and everything. And then, of course, Mike talked about the Good News Club and our missions there, our partnership with CEF, which is also in our budget. And then, yeah, like you said, Hope. Hope talked about Kentucky and how our mission partnership has continued there. Maybe we'll go back there. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. And then, of course, our partnership in South Asia with our missionaries there. And we have a lot of individuals in our church that financially support those people, but don't broadcast that because those are personal gifts. But that's part of missions giving too. That's kind of facilitated through the church. And then a brand new partnership that we have that hopefully next year in 2026, we're actually going to be able to send people to New York City to help with church planners. And so we're currently, until November the 2nd, we are collecting coats for our church planners in New York. They want to be able to give coats out, and so North Carolina Baptist and South Carolina Baptist have come together, and our church is collecting coats, and so you can drop those off in the Welcome Center in the bin. And just last month, we sent, 4 bins of shoes to North Carolina through Chris Pound in the Hurricane Helene relief efforts that are still going on there. So missions is a huge pillar of what we do, and I'll be honest, as I said yesterday, I think our missions has just increased even more in the last 5 years. When I came, we were doing missions local, but we weren't doing a lot outside of our state and then abroad. And so now we are, right? And so I think that's really good. Want to give a shout out to Sandra Pound as well. She went on a mission trip to South Asia several years ago. And then, of course, a couple from our church decided to go on that mission trip with her to South Asia and went, and they end up being called to that mission field there, all because Sandra invited them to go. So that just shows how important an invite is. Something that small might not be, and it's not small, but it might seem small. It's really not. Really appreciate Sandra doing that. And then, of course, we are their sending church. Hannah and Colette going to New York and making some connections with church planners that next year country might get to go to town with Gaston going to New York next year, and be praying about that. It's not a crazy expensive trip as much as an international would be, and it's good to get your feet wet. I've been on mission trips to New York. I am as southern as they come. I'm going to New York would be a stretch, but for a lot of us, but it would be neat to see, for people to get to see how hard church really is in places like that and how easy it is in places like where we are. So a lot of our missions opportunities, it's a lot more than giving. And I said this on Mission Sunday, but one reason why we did Mission Sunday is because I didn't want people to just think, okay, well, we've got this budget line item and I'm a tither of the church. I give to the church. And so, that's just the budget line item for local missions, or that's just the budget line item for women's missions, or this or that. And no, it's a lot more than just a number. And I really wanted people to be able to see that.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you look at the financial reports and stuff that we do, and I think they are important, but a lot of times I think when you look at stuff of that nature, you're thinking it kind of becomes mechanical. You kind of lose that, how it really affects people or how it touches people. And I think we have kind of gotten away from really looking at the effect that things like that have on other people. We ultimately, as I mentioned on Mission Sunday, evangelism is the goal that we work towards when we do these simple things for people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like what you said about Sandra Pound. She had no idea in inviting people, something as simple as just inviting somebody to go on a trip, the impact that would have not only on their lives, but the lives they will touch as they minister wherever they end up going.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I think we fail to think about, and this seems kind of odd, but the complexity of the simpleness.
Yep.
And how just a brief moment in time affects something great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good word. I mean, the complexity and the simplicity, right? And I think that's true. And, we have to think about that in missions. And during your presentation of missions on Mission Sunday, you referenced the Great Commission and that we're to go. That's exactly what we're to do. And another one of our speakers mentioned that we need to make sure that we are giving, going, and praying. Those are the three initiatives that he gave. And so it's a big pillar of our church. It's important. And yesterday I shared the amount that in total, last year we gave $50,426.31 towards missions. And that doesn't even include our budgeted items. That's just CP, association, and our 3 mission offerings. And so when you put all that together, it's over $100,000 that is going towards missions from our church. And so it's a big pillar. It's a big reason why we do what we do. If you have any questions about missions, I've already got a lot of emails about some other mission opportunities that we might engage in and that we might do. And as I mentioned on Mission Sunday, not every single thing that we do that has to do with missions was mentioned. And so I think that's important to remember, that is that there's a lot of other missions that we didn't get to because we only had one service, right? We weren't able to explain all of those different things. So any closing words on missions?
Well, I think the main thing I would like to say about missions is be involved. I think it was laid out very plainly for us on that Sunday to go, to give, and to pray.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I couldn't agree more. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed our start to our Pillars of the Church mini-series here on the Menorah Podcast. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on your notifications so that every time the First Baptist Church Gaston released a video on YouTube, you get notified on your phone and on your devices. And so thank you guys for tuning in. Our views have kind of gone down on YouTube. We want those to pick up. So why don't you send this link to somebody, share it with somebody. And as always, thank you to our faithful listeners. You've been listening to the 86th episode of the Menorah Podcast, the podcast that seeks to share the light, send the light, and speak the light of Jesus Christ all across the airwaves of the internet. Today is Thursday, October the 16th, and we will see you on the 23rd, 1 week from today. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.